Hello, in this video I'm going to talk to you about section 1 of chapter 11. Section 1 is about factorizing, on what are factors. This section indeed is an introduction to the rest of the chapter. But first, factors are part of a formula or equation that are multiplied by each other. So when we look at this formula contains two factors because there are two parts that are multiplied by each other. It's the 5 times this part. So this means the factors in this formula are 5 and a plus 8. When we look at the second formula, there are also two parts that are multiplied by each other. So, what are the factors in this second formula? This is the first one, and that is the second one. So this means the first factor is x plus 9, and the second factor is x minus 3. So again, when you talk about factors, you are always multiplying. And both formulas had two factors, two parts of the formula that were multiplied by each other. So earlier this year, we learned how to remove brackets. And when you look at this example, again you see there are two factors because we multiply both. We multiply 6 with all this that's between brackets. So we learned how to remove brackets. And we did that by using arcs. So we calculated 6 times 2x and then 6 times 3. So when you do this, you will get this formula. 6 times 2x, that's 12x, and 6 times 3, that's plus 18. When you remove the brackets, you see now you have a formula with terms, because they are added together. We have a plus. So now it's a formula with terms. So this section is about factorizing, and factorizing is the opposite of removing brackets. So when we do have a formula with terms, I go factorizing, then I have again a formula with two factors. And that's what we're going to learn in this chapter. And you need to know this because you need it to solve quadratic equations. So in this example, one of the factors could be 2. The other one then, because it needs to be the same formula, over here you should use 4x, because 2 times 4x is 8x. And after the 4x there should be plus 7, because 2 times 7 is 14. So again, now we do have a formula with two factors. The first one is 2, and the second one is 4x plus 7. So factorizing is the opposite of removing brackets over here in this example. So this means I'm going to write my formula as a product of two factors. You can also factorize numbers, and that's the first example. Suppose I have the number 756 and I want to factorize this number. This means I want to write it down with as many factors as possible. So, to do this, I'm going to look at this number and I can think about, can I divide this number by 2? And the answer is yes, because 2 times 378 is 756. So now I've written this number 756 as a product of two factors. But we really want as many factors as possible. So I'm going to do the same thing, but now I'm going to look at this number, and the first two, I copy him. So then I look at this number, and again I'm going to look if it's possible to divide it by 2. And the answer is yes. So now I have 3 factors. 2 times 2 times 189 is still 756. In the next step, I continue the numbers I already have, and then I'm going to look at the next number. is it still possible to divide this number by 2? And you should know we only use whole numbers. And then you will see we cannot divide this by 2. So then I just check if I can divide this number by 3. And that's possible. 3 times 63. Now I have written my original number in 4 factors. And I keep doing this until it's no longer possible. 63. I can also divide it by 3. 3 times 21. Now I do have 5 factors. In the last step, there's still one possibility. 21 is also, I can also divide it by 3. 3 times 7. And now I have written 756 as a product of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 factors. So this means 756 can also be written as 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 7. So now I've factorized this number, 756. Well, you can do the same thing with a formula. And it means you write the formula as the product of factors. Let me show you an example. We have this formula, y is equal to 36x squared. Well, I could write this as a product of 2 factors. For example, 2 times 18x squared. But I could also have chosen a factor 3. 3 times 12x squared. And they are all the same formula. The only thing I'm doing is I'm going to write it as a product of 2 factors. Another example is 6 times 6x squared. Another example, I could also write 9x times 4x. Because 9 times 4 is also 36, and x times x is x squared. So these are all examples of the same formula, and I've used 2 factors in each example. But now I really would like to write this formula in as many factors as possible. So I really would like to write down a product of as many factors as possible, and it should be still the same formula. So I'm going to take a look at 36, and I do this in the same way as my last example. 36. I can write 36 as a product of 2 and 18. But I can do a bit more steps, I guess. So it's 2 times, because 18 is, I can still divide it by 2. It's 2 times 9. 2 times 2, then I look at 9. I can no longer divide it by 2, but I can divide it by 3, because 9 is 3 times 3. And then there are no more factors possible, because we do not use factor 1, because then you can keep continuing writing down this factor 1. So, at this point, I've only written 36 as a product of 4 factors. But then there's also this x squared. And I also can write this as a product of factors. Let me first start with the numbers. 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. And then I could write times x squared, but then I do not have as many factors as possible, so I write down times x times x. And now I've written the original formula in as a product with as much factors as possible. So this is called factorizing. And again, we do not use the factor 1, but because when we do this, you can continue writing down times 1 times 1 times 1. Then there are way too many factors possible. So we do not ever use factor 1. So why do you need to learn to factorize? Again, it's because in this chapter we're also going to learn how to solve quadratic equations, and then you really need to be able to factorize. So This is the end of the section 1.